Hello hunters, welcome back to my channel. My name's Johanna. I am a huge ancient history nerd, and today I wanted to make a video about why I believe that Atlantis was either a real place or was based in truth. So shall we do this? Have you got a drink? Are you ready? Are you ready to talk about Atlantis? Because, well, I feel like this is a good video for somebody who knows nothing about Atlantis, apart from like maybe the odd Disney movie. Because it turns out there's a lot of stuff going on. I did get my hands on some recently unclassified information from the CIA, which is very interesting in regards to one of the locations that Atlantis might possibly be. This story was written by a man called Plato, who was around 300 BC. And he said that he got this story directly from one of his ancestors, Solon, who was around about 600 BC, 300 years before Plato. Great granddaddy. Solon said that he got the story directly from the Egyptian priesthood, who it was their job to document and preserve all of the Egyptian history and historical records. So Solon went from Greece to Egypt in the year around 600 BC. He met with the priesthood and he wrote down this story that they had documented. Are you still with me? A lot of people contest Plato's story, saying, well, one, he's just going off story off a story off a story. Two, the way that he writes the story, although he prefaces the story by literally saying, this is a true story, I don't think Plato was lying. You can find the translation of Plato's story online, and I've read it. One, it's unfinished, which is a mystery all in itself. But the way that he tells the story, it is so jam-packed full of facts. It is fact. If you're telling a story purely for metaphor, as allegory, like if you wouldn't need to go into such detail about really unrelated things. If you're telling a morality tale, then you don't need to go into serious detail about the color and the size and the shape of the bricks that made the buildings, or all the types of animals that were stored there, or where exactly the harbor was in relation to the palace. All that stuff doesn't really matter if you're telling a story about the right and wrongs of humanity. Get to the point, Plato. I didn't really fully take notice of the Atlantis story until I had researched something called the Younger Dryas Comet Impact. And if you don't know what that is, like, Google it immediately because it's so relevant to human history. But in a nutshell, a lot of scientists are now concluding that around the time of the last ice age, which was about 12,600 years ago, there was a time when the weather on the planet Earth changed dramatically. A comet impact, or a series of comet impacts, that would have completely melted the ice age as it was then and caused huge cataclysms and tsunamis all the way around the globe, and might be the reason why every ancient civilization in the world has a flood story or a cataclysm story or some kind of disaster movie written into the history. What a coincidence. So the more that scientists are looking into the Younger Dryas Comet Impact, the more they are finding evidence for comet impacts. FYI, just look at Randall Carlson and all of his work on it, and loads of other geologists. There's like so many science papers out there now. Go look. Science is telling us that there are 4 or 5 impact sites over North America, the North American ice sheet. And what these comets would have done, they would have whacked into North America, immediately melted miles and miles thick of ice, and then sent this ice in all directions in this huge tsunamis that would have then been ripping up literally pieces of the earth, turning it into a huge tsunami of like churning rocks and death, and basically spreading it over about 2/3 of the globe, destroying literally everything in its path. Quite a bad day. So the dates that these scientists, if you're still with me, great. The dates that the geologists and the scientists are saying that these comet impacts happened is around 12,600 years ago. And then if we look at the story of the history of Atlantis and the date that the Egyptians told Solon that this cataclysm happened, the dates match up. And that's what got my attention. The Egyptian priest told Solon that 9,000 years ago, Atlantis got destroyed in a day and a night. And the date that Solon was told that was 600 BC. And the date that science tells us a comet hit the world, 9,600 BC. And the chances of one story lining up with the science, okay, you've got my attention. You have my attention. And so that's what started. What is going on with the light? We're just chasing the sun here. Younger Dryas Comet impact. The date lines exactly with the story that Plato was told. For me, that was enough to start researching properly. Then I came across Bright Insight Jimmy's video about Atlantis and some new ideas and new theories about where Atlantis might have been. So I'm not going to try and copy Jimmy's video because his videos are so informative and so amazing. So make sure you go and watch them and then you can like come back and we'll be on the same page. Okay, so where is it? Where is Atlantis? If it was real, we would have found it by now. Here's some of the problems that I think Atlantis searchers have. One, you're looking for an island in the middle of the ocean. Personally, I don't think that we're going to find Atlantis at the bottom of the sea. That's not what I believe what the text tells us. The story says that Atlantis fell into the sea or got destroyed, but it says that, and afterwards, you couldn't go there anymore to the city because it was surrounded by mud, by like a mud barrier, and therefore you couldn't sail. No more water. It's not under the sea. It's either one of two things. On land, mud, earth, or in some sort of bog, marshy, boggy area, like a delta, and you can't sail there anymore because there's literally earthy, muddy bog that's stopping you from going there. So why people are looking at the bottom of the ocean baffles me, because literally read the story. People are looking for an island. So when I used to think of Atlantis, I used to think of literally like a tiny island.
A cute little island that like dropped into the ocean.
No. In the translation of the text, the word for island can also mean like peninsula or sort of area. It doesn't necessarily translate directly to island. It can also be like area of land. Atlantis was actually just the capital city of a huge empire, a civilization, the Atlantean Empire, which had 10 cities and 10 kings. This place was huge. I think it covered huge parts of the world. And Atlantis with the circles, as we like, the classic Atlantis that we like to look for, was just the city center on one of the islands or one of the peninsulas or one of the areas. But the whole civilization was kind of everywhere. Like, this is going to be a big place to look for. So where is it? I personally believe that Atlantis was anywhere near Santorini or Malta or Crete. I don't believe it was in that center of the Mediterranean. The locations just don't match with the list that Solon was given, the description that Solon was given. People are saying that maybe it's in Antarctica, maybe it's in India. If we're taking the Pillars of Hercules as the Strait of Gibraltar, which is basically like when you leave the Mediterranean and go out towards the Atlantic Ocean, if we're taking that as the location, I think that whole area is the slice of the world where we need to be looking for Atlantis, not over in India, not over in the Caribbean, down in Antarctica. I think that it needs to be around the Atlantic Ocean on that side of the world. And so my 3 locations where I think Atlantis possibly was are in that strip of the world. Number 1, the Richat structure. Richat structure. I have a very, very strong feeling that this might possibly be the location. It fits so many of Plato's descriptions. The fact that there were the mountains, the plain, the color of the rock, the black and the red and the white rock, the springs, the spring of fresh water is literally there. The fact that there are elephants on the island makes sense because the Richat structure is the Eye of the Sahara. It's in West Africa. I'm not going to go too much into the Richat structure because, again, Jimmy has done such a great video on that. Go watch that video if you want more in depth about the Richat structure. Two things that Jimmy did not say in his video. One, I was researching lost civilizations and I came across the whole lost continent of Mu, which was supposed to be around, it used to be in the Pacific Ocean, and they're saying there used to be a continent there, a huge civilization that literally linked Easter Island and Hawaii and the Philippines. That whole area used to be one continent, and now all that's left is just like little tiny island Hawaii and Easter Island. That's all for another video. However, I found an old book that was talking about the island of Mu. In there was an illustration of a world map, and it had this ancient map which had Mu, and opposite on the other side of the Atlantic, it had a landmass which I think looks like the butt of West Africa. And then it has Atlantis literally right there on the map. Why is that appearing in a map in a book in like 1937? Second bit of information, and this is very cool information, and I have to give my source away. Jimmy from Bright Insight did send me this when we were discussing about Atlantis theories. He was like, yeah, but have you heard about Project Magnet? And I'm like, no. Right. So in the 60s, the American government did a top secret project with the military called Project Magnet, where they went around the world and they were measuring places of interest that had serious electromagnetic current frequencies that were like super high. And they were going around the world to measure them with planes. And they measured the Richat structure because it has unusual electromagnetic energy fields in that area. Obi, be quiet. This is the cool bit. So this was top secret information, but recently the CIA have released the documents and the dossier, so you can literally read the report about all the areas in the world where they went. Now, the reason why this is interesting is because ancient civilizations often always built their cities around areas of serious electromagnetic energy for reasons known to them. And maybe they could harness it, or maybe it was something seriously to do with their culture, or maybe it was a religious thing. We just don't know. We don't build a city now based on the electromagnetic energy field of the location. Imagine if we did. The fact that the American government recognized the Richat structure was a special place and they scanned it and they kept that secret was interesting. Yes, I know the one big problem that we have with the Richat structure, I mean, it literally has the exact formation of the rings. And if you go onto like the Google map thing, literally the Richat structure creates the whole description of Atlantis. It's pretty freaky. The rings come up and then there's like, so if, I don't know how or if that would even work in science, but if there was some way that we discovered that actually the whole continent of Africa had risen from 12,600 years ago, that would fit. So the second location, which is pretty interesting, is in Spain, in Dona Ana Park. There are marshlands, remember? Mud. Marshlands that now that they're actually scanning them and looking at them, it looks like there could be a circular formation there. It looks like it could be the ruins of a city literally sitting in the south of Spain under marshlands for thousands of years. So there's a lot of exciting hoo-ha around that location because it really would fit with like the pillars of right next to the Pillars of Hercules. It's facing the Atlantic Ocean. It seems to be in that correct location of the world. It's in that little slice of cake of the earth that fits really well the description of Plato's Atlantis. Is it in Spain? I don't know. Who knows? It will be easier to go and excavate and have a look and actually really dig around Spain. However, the Richat structure is a place where nobody's going to really know, or nobody's going to be able to get there to even really look at this stuff. I have a lot of people in the comments saying, why don't you go to the Richat structure? Why don't you and Jimmy and all like a team of you go and YouTubers and go? It is nearly impossible to go to that location in the world. One guy did, he was called Josh. I had the pleasure of meeting him in Egypt last year. He is a amazing YouTuber, tenacious, one would say. And he actually went to Mauritania and he went to the Richat structure to see for himself. He told me off the record, like the things that did not appear in his YouTube video. he nearly died on that trip going to that location. There is no food. There is no food. He was eating leaves with vinegar on just to stop his stomach from like collapsing. There was no food. There's no restaurants. The people living there have very limited food supply. There was no way there's no shops, he couldn't buy any food. There was rotten goat. It was rotten goat or leaves and vinegar. Also, the country's in a pretty dangerous state, and he said that he literally saw dead bodies. Like, just dead bodies, he had to step over dead bodies. And the area to drive up to the Richat structure, there are landmines from like a previous war, civil war, and at any moment your car can get blown up and flipped, and you literally drive past other cars and bodies that have been flipped and are just there. So for anyone thinking, yeah, pop over to the Richat structure, yeah, you can't. And I don't think for many, many years will that place be safe to do that, unfortunately. So yeah, Spain is a little bit easier. The other location that's come up in recent times is Morocco. So it's a little bit further up than the Richat structure, but still on that side of the world. And apparently there is evidence of another circular structure that's coming up on like satellite images. And again, the Atlas Mountains, literally the Atlas Mountains would fit the location like perfectly for the mountains surrounding it. Considering that the king of Atlantis was supposed to be called Atlas, the Atlas Mountains, Atlas, Atlantis, it does all fit. However, going back to my theory that Atlantis the translation of it being an island is actually a kingdom of 10 areas, 10 cities, I don't know why it couldn't be all three. Why could the kingdom of the empire of Atlanteans not stretch from southern Spain, across the Gibraltar, down the Canary Islands, Morocco, right down into the Richat structure? I personally feel like we need to step back and observe Atlantis as this huge civilization. And it was all the way down that coastline 12,000 years ago. And then a comet hit the world and literally sent a tsunami and cataclysms all over the gaff and destroyed everything. If a tsunami's hitting North America and traveling that way across the Atlantic, it is going to literally hit that whole slice, Spain, Morocco, and the Western Sahara. So why would it not be utterly, utterly destroyed? Maybe Atlantis is all three. They're all different cities of the same empire. The Morocco location also has that native red, black, and white rock. So it's matching, and again, Morocco could have elephants as well. In fact, all of that area could have elephants. So at the end of the day, there are problems with all of those locations, but out of everything in the world, I think it's going to be one of those three, if not all of those three. And I think that the more science develops and the more we actually look into the Younger Dryas Comet Theory, and when that becomes literally school of thought and like official history of the world, I think it is totally, totally possible that there were civilizations that were completely wiped out. However, there were a few survivors. Obviously, with all catastrophes, there will be a few remaining survivors. And they're living now in a world only full of hunter-gatherers. So what do? If you are someone who was living in a civilization which had kings and houses and a military and shops and trade, and now you have to live with hunter-gatherers, you're gonna go join them and be like, yo, can I live with you? Because I literally don't know how to live in the wild. And they're gonna be like, yeah, wow, you look pretty cool and different. Why do you know so much stuff? And they'll be like, yeah, I know a lot. Like, I know like a lot of maths, and I can teach you how to have like a hierarchy with like managers and kings and stuff. And I can teach you how to build stuff, and I can teach you how to farm so you don't always have to run around. And they're like, oh my God, what are you, like a god? And they're like, yeah, you can call me that if you want. I think that's really probably what happened in human history. And that's why every single ancient civilization in the world that has written stories, they all write that they were taught how to be civilized by other people coming and telling them how to do maths, how to do agriculture, how to do everything. And I think it's much more likely that these people were survivors from a previous generation and they were perceived as gods not like actual gods. Maybe they were, who am I to say? But for me, that makes the most sense, and that's what I believe. And I'm literally sitting in the dark now. What is going on? It'll be all kinds of complicated to edit. So in a nutshell, that's what's going on. Make sure you watch Jimmy's video. If you want to know more about why I think the other sites aren't Atlantis, if you look James Cameron's Finding Atlantis, it's on Disney Plus or Discovery. That goes into detail about all the places where Atlantis probably isn't. And then they end up looking at the Spanish one and kind of concluding that that's where Atlantis probably was. One of the next videos that I'm going to do is talking about the Egyptian story of Osiris, because in Osiris's history, in his story, he was one of those survivors from the Atlantean Empire, and Osiris and Thoth were survivors from the Atlantean Empire, and they made their way over to Egypt to literally settle there and settle in the first town of Egypt, in Abydos, and bring all the knowledge over and teach it to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians did teach it. They preserved it and they kept it for thousands and thousands of years. And later, when the Greeks came over, they told Solon and the Greeks their history of how they got there. And it is now filtering down to us. So I want to go into a bit more detail about Osiris and his journey and how that all connects, and how Egypt's origin stories is Atlantis. Right, I've talked enough for today. If you were still with me, amazing. Thank you for following. I'd really appreciate it if you could like or share this video, because then it would reach way more people. And I think more people need to know about the Younger Dryas Comet impact, and people need to know about the possible origin of Atlantis. So thank you so much. I will see you next week, and happy hunting. Goodbye.